We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and I'm wanted in a couple of states. 50, actually. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Terminator month, and this week we are talking the 2019 film Terminator Dark Fate. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my enhanced co-host, Andrew Williams. All right. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I am.
Whenever we decided to do Terminator Month, I was most looking forward to this episode for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I love this movie, and I think it is excellent. And beyond that, I don't think enough people saw it or talk about it, and I really wanted to dig into it. I love the whole franchise. I've been saying that all month, and I've enjoyed every episode this month. But this one in particular, I was most hyped to revisit this film.
Yeah, I agree. This is one that kind of came and went ultimately. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but yeah, I have a lot of for this one. So this is one where I knew this week was going to be a breeze. No issues whatsoever with this one. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, in fact, normally I don't make this kind of disclaimer at the beginning of these episodes. I mean, the purpose of our podcast is never to convince you these movies are great or misunderstood. Go back and watch them. We're just looking to have positive discussions, and we're happy that you join us. But if you have not seen this movie, if you are a Terminator fan, if you enjoy other movies in this franchise, and you passed on seeing Dark Fate, which the numbers say a lot of people did, and if you still haven't watched it, I encourage you to pause this episode and go watch it before you listen. Because, of course, we're going to spoil it just by the nature of what we do, talking about it. And you certainly don't have to. By all means, if you want to go ahead and listen to us spoil it, you can do that. But I think there's enough in this movie that the more you don't know, the more you're going to enjoy if you enjoy this Terminator franchise, that I felt the need just this one time to put that disclaimer out there. But Andrew, I think it's time that we launch into this movie, Terminator Dark Fate, released November 1st of 2019. Man, if we only knew. I did see this movie in theaters. I almost on a whim, because I had seen the trailers. It looked cool. I was kind of burnt out on Terminator sequels, as I think a lot of people were, but I had a chance to go to the movie, so me and friend of the show, my wife, saw it. I loved it. I'm pretty sure I rambled to you how much I liked it at the time. It's not quite in that area where it was a lot of people's last movie in theaters. You know, the lockdown was coming. We're mere months away at this point. But this movie had a full theatrical run that, as we're about to find out, did not do well. The budget for this movie was upwards of $185 million. It's expensive to make a Terminator movie, folks. At the box office, worldwide, it only brings in $261.1 million. It is legitimately one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. It loses almost $200 million for the various production companies that came together to create it. All that being said, critically, it's pretty well received. It holds a 70% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. That is higher than any of the other sequels that came after T2. And the audience rating is right there with it. It's got an 82% audience score. So again, the people that did see this movie seemed to really enjoy it. But it just wasn't a lot of people that actually saw it.
Yeah, that's the nice way of putting it. And I will I will admit I did not see it. I don't know why I didn't see it. By that point I was pretty regularly going to the movies every week. I don't know if there was other things out that I saw or if it just kind of slipped through the cracks. So I kind of passed on it at the time. It was that movie where I was kind of like, I'll get around to it. But I think the kind of Terminator fatigue was real at that point. Genesis was not that long before this. And we talked about it last week. Didn't care for that one much when I saw it in theaters. And so I kind of wasn't jazzed. And even with Linda Hamilton returning, I was still kind of wary. And this movie just kind of came and went. Ultimately, that's kind of what it feels like. Like, it came out critically, did okay, but nobody went to see it. It kind of was in and out almost as quick as it, or rather, it was almost out as quick as it came. And I did see it later, per your urging, which was
constant as every morning.
Thorough.
That's how you woke up with 3 text messages from me.
Andrew, I'm once again asking you to watch Terminator Dark Fate.
Dun 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 dun. I signed every text message.
Yeah, he did. It's in my head now. But unfortunately, audiences just did not turn out for it. And at this point, I think there might be rumors of another Terminator film, but it's effectively put the franchise on ice going forward. And I assume it's probably going to be like that for a while.
Now let's take a look at this creative team, because it's pretty extensive. If there was anything generating hype for this movie amongst the fan base, it was probably the announcement that James Cameron was once again involved. Early rumors he might direct, but ultimately his official title is executive producer, as well as a story credit. So ultimately the story we get is hatched by James Cameron, but a lot of voices get to work on it. So, story credit, we have James Cameron, Charles Eagley, and Josh Friedman. Basically, James Cameron and his guys come on board to work on it. Friedman, notable for also working on the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And then you have a number of people that actually get writing credits, such as David Goyer, Justin Rhodes, and Billy Ray. It's kind of hard to parse out where everyone falls. I believe David Goyer was the early version of the script, and much was changed over time, but, David Goyer still gets that writing credit. Alum of the show, David Goyer, because the man has his fingerprints all over science fiction and comic book films. Movies like Dark City, all 3 Blade films, Batman Begins, Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance. His filmography is quite the roller coaster.
It is. Like I said, we've talked about David Goyer before. He's got credit on the entire Nolan trilogy, the Blade trilogy, Kickboxer 2, if that's the thing you're into. And even stuff recently, like the recent Hellraiser reboot. He's got a story credit on that as well. So he's everywhere. And then there's stuff that he's got uncredited writing on. He's got stuff that he's done script doctor work for. He's everywhere. Even television stuff, especially now with the streaming stuff out there. He's got he was the creator and writer for the Apple Plus or the Apple TV Foundation series. He's got writing and creating credits on the Sandman television series. He's everywhere. David Goyer will continue until morale improves. At this point, basically. So yeah, he was brought into this. What was kind of talked about with this movie is that it kind of had a writer's room, which is odd for a single film. Like, you hear a lot about studios developing writer's rooms when they're trying to put together, like, franchises, shared universes, things like that. Like, they talk about, okay, here's our writer's room of people. Marvel very notably has one. DC supposedly putting one together for the upcoming DCU. Now, ultimately, this is intended to be another trilogy that is eventually determined during these conversations. But interestingly, like I said, just looking at the story credits, there are 5 credited people for the story, and then 2 of them are credited for the screenplay, but then a 6th additional person credited for the screenplay, and none of this includes Tim Miller, who we'll talk about in a minute, the director, who also had lots of input into this story and the direction the movie was going to take. So ultimately, you have 7 people determining the course of one film. Now, to be fair, like we said, we do really like this film, but this is pretty rare. Anytime you get a movie that has this many people sticking their hands in the pot, it almost always ends up feeling really disjointed, very uneven. The tone can be very shaky. This movie does stick the landing, but this is usually not a good sign.
It's kind of a miracle
to
that
have
it does,
this many people. Yeah, honestly, it kind of is. It's usually not a good sign when there's that many people credited with the script.
Just to round out those writing credits, I mentioned Justin Rhodes, who's a bit of a newcomer. Honestly, hard to find many other credits. A lot of upcoming projects, seems to be breaking into the industry. Maybe knows the right people, but this is an early credit of his, and which is kind of the complete opposite of our last writing credit of Billy Ray, who is a veteran of the industry by this point. Movies like Hearts War, Hunger Games, and interestingly, Andrew, all in the same year, 2019, Billy Ray is a writer on Gemini Man, Terminator Dark Fate, and Richard Jewell. All huge bombs at the box office, all losing money. So I'm not even going to talk about the quality of those films. Honestly, Dark Fate's the only one I saw, and I think it's great. It seems maybe a string of bad luck to be attached to those 3 in the same year.
Well, yeah, especially because the year before, Billy Ray is one of the writers on the movie Overlord, which is awesome. That's the Wolfenstein in all but name movie they made in 2018, starring Wyatt Russell, and it's awesome. It rules. I'm mad more people haven't seen it, and that's just sometimes how it is. I mean, he's responsible for Captain Phillips. Look at me, I'm the captain now. That's
one of the most
that's from our
iconic
boy.
lines of the last 20 years.
That's Billy Ray. That's our boy Billy Ray coming in and putting that up for us. So it's quite a wild career, but like you said, it goes back into the mid 90s. It's kind of wild how some of this stuff comes around. I don't know if these are guys from Cameron's bubble, if these are guys maybe from like Boyer's bubble. Like, it looks like it might be. It looks like Friedman has some work on Foundation and the Sarah Connor Chronicles. So I don't quite know where they all came from, but they all do end up having an impact enough that they are all involved. Even Charles Eagley, looking at his filmography, he writes Piranha 2, which, for those of you who don't know, is James Cameron's first directing credit, or his first like feature film directing credit. So going way, way back there. So who knows how all this comes together? I imagine it's long-time relationships just kind of all coming to roost. And like I said, if you're building out a writer's room, you'd call a bunch of people you know, I guess. Like, I mean, if I had a bunch of writing friends and I was trying to figure out the best angle for this, call them all together, figure it out. And that kind of feels like that's what happened here.
You mentioned our director, Andrew. This movie is directed by Tim Miller. Now, here is Tim Miller's feature-length filmography: Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate. That's it. However, the man has a decades-long career breaking into visual effects with video games, doing like cutscenes and video game effects, moving into Hollywood, worked on some X-Men films, and finally gets the call-up with Deadpool. He was responsible for that cinematic that got leaked, kind of led to that movie actually getting made. Does not get to continue on with Deadpool 2, some rumors about some creative conflicts with Ryan Reynolds, and gets the nod for this one instead, which is kind of funny because you read into some of the behind the scenes, and there seems to continue to be creative conflicts, this time between him and James Cameron. Because James Cameron is executive producer, but he's kind of overseeing every little thing, whether it's casting and writing, not physically being on set, but giving his notes. And you've got two kind of creative people clashing over control over this movie, which again, it's amazing it comes out as well as it does. And I've got to heap the lion's share of that praise on our director, Tim Miller. To take the writing input from that many people and having James Cameron continuously overlook the process as you direct and manage the entire film, even in the editing room, James Cameron is still in there making changes. So to harness it all to one, not just coherent, but very good film, that's the director's job. And I think Tim Miller crushed it with this one.
I agree. Like you said, you can dig into all the news and rumors as much as you want. It's ultimately it's unfortunate. Obviously the story's on Deadpool 2. Like Deadpool was a huge success, and to kind of then have the big kind of divergence in thoughts between Ryan Reynolds and Tim Miller, who, their work is the only reason that first film ever got made, which was its own kind of set of trials and tribulations, trying to see that through to the end. It is so honestly, Deadpool, first and foremost, getting made and happening is a miracle. But, so Dark Fate here kind of seems to follow an odd, similar trajectory of Tim Miller kind of working with these. And the reality is that when you've got this many voices, there's going to be contention almost always. And in many cases, the reason there are so many writers is because you have tensions and conflicts on set, and you decide you're going to bring in other writers to finish the script or write the scenes that you wanted to kind of take on. So it can be a tough thing. And like I said, props to Tim Miller for seeing that through. The other big thing he's probably known for is the Netflix anthology series Love, Death, and Robots, which he is a creator, executive producer, and sometimes director on. He's got a few episodes of that he's done. David Fincher done a few too, and just a wonderfully weird show. So strange sometimes, but very, very weird. And that's definitely something where it feels like he really kind of finally get a chance to just do his thing without anybody telling him what to do. But yeah, he comes here, and like I said, I think he does a great job. He takes a lot of disparate ideas and puts them together, makes a single story with a consistent tone that works really, really well. The emotional beats hit, the action is good. We know the action was going to be good. He's done good action pretty much everywhere he's been. One of the things I think he's done that's actually very cool is he did the intro credits to David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which are a wonderfully crafted, very strange, weird sequence off of the American version of that unfortunately Fincher never got to see through to the end. But overall, I think he does do a great job. He's wrangling a lot of things here, which is not an easy job, especially on a production like this, of this size. And he nails it.
Seems like a pretty down-to-earth and cool dude. I recommend his appearance on the Corridor Digital YouTube channel, their Animators React series. He breaks down some scenes from this movie and kind of goes through his entire career. And it's a pretty cool peek behind the curtain and insight to the man. But without further ado, Andrew, this time we talk about this movie, Terminator, Dark Fate. Are you ready?
Yes.
After preventing the apocalyptic event known as Judgment Day, Sarah Connor retires to Mexico with her son John to live a quiet life off the grid. This doesn't last long, as a Terminator sent from the future they prevented tracks them down and kills John Connor. Years later, Sarah has become a Terminator hunter, destroying the machines as they arrive from the future. It's on one of these missions that she meets Danny, a young woman being hunted by a Rev 9 killing machine, and Grace, an augmented super soldier sent from the future to protect Danny. When the trio are unable to kill the Rev 9, they seek help from the anonymous person that has been informing Sarah of the arriving Terminators. When they arrive on his doorstep, Sarah is shocked to find the same Terminator that murdered John. The Terminator now goes by the name Carl and agrees to help the trio stop the Rev 9. Andrew, we are back to two characters are sent from the future, one to hunt, one to protect. Back to that tried and true formula.
Yep, we are. For better or worse. I know that's something that was a point of contention in some of the not great takes that I did read, as they kind of thought running back to that or continuing with that trend was potentially a little tired. I disagree. I think it's, if you're going to do it and you're going to do it well, why not? But yes, regardless, we are back to heroes from the future, or, you know, a hero and a villain from the future sent back to the present with a specific mission. And
I mean, really, of all 6 films, it's only Salvation that breaks from it.
But doesn't, yeah, it really is. This future, I'm starting to get this idea that maybe this stuff isn't preventable. But we keep trying and failing, apparently. But I do like what we're doing here. It is got a lot of steps, and it does add a lot of ripples. It does have that formula, but there is a lot of additional things thrown into the mix this time.
Well, Andrew, we're going to talk about those additional things and talk about that mix that is delivered to us. But first, we are going to talk about this cast, starting with the high point, the best casting and best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, go ahead and kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Terminator Dark Fate?
This is an interesting one, because I think there's a lot of people here giving really good performances. So I'm going with one of our new characters. I'm going with Natalia Reyes, who plays our new hero, or kind of hero of the future, Danny Ramos. It is a big ripple of this film that we move away from John Connor. All of the movies to this point, John Connor has been a large presence, either because of what he's doing or what the movie means for him. From the first one being about his conception, the second one to being about saving him specifically, 3 setting him up as the kind of hero of the future, and then 4 with him kind of being the hero of the future, and then even 5 with the ripples it takes with John Connor's character. He's this presence in all 5 films. This is the first film where we kind of decide, no, it's not about John anymore. So much so, he's killed in the first 2 minutes.
And he's still a kid.
It's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah, it's wild. It's really crazy. They pull the rug out from under you immediately. And that sets up a lot of interesting ripples for the story that we'll talk about later. But anyway, so this film centers on now our new essential kind of linchpin of the future that's kind of going to be the precipice for everything coming together, and that is Danny. This is an interesting character to have to be, simply because you are essentially kind of coming into the John Connor role, which again, talk about a character that's cast a big shadow over this whole franchise. And I think she does a fantastic job. I think the arc she takes throughout this film is really, really good. She starts off kind of fish out of water, very similar to Sarah Connor in the first Terminator. Not at all prepared for what's happening. But versus kind of Sarah, who takes her journey over a couple of films, Danny takes this journey essentially through the course of this film. And we see her kind of get fed up with Grace, her kind of future protector, treating her like a fragile piece of glass or something. Like she wants to insulate her. She's like, you can't do anything that might threaten you. Like I have to, like it's almost obsessive, the level of protectiveness that Grace is trying to put onto Danny throughout this film. And Danny finally kind of has enough. She's like, I'm not going to just sit and do nothing while you guys do everything. So she takes this journey through the film that kind of ends with her being a major part of the defeat of this Terminator chasing them. And I think it's a fantastic arc. I think it establishes what this character is. And you kind of watch her become that future leader in real time. throughout the course of this film, which I think is a very cool path to take, especially when you're bringing in a new character to a franchise like this that is so rooted in these kind of classic characters. So it's not an easy place to sit. There's a lot of competition within this cast from returning characters, and it can be very hard to stand out and not get lost in the shuffle, and she does not. So as this movie goes on, I think she gets better and better and better, and the character gets more and more fleshed out. And it is very unfortunate, as far as I'm concerned, that we won't see more from this character going forward. But I am going with Talia Reyes.
Yeah, I agree. Very good performance anchoring this movie. And as you said, I like that we see different phases to this character and so much growth over time. Because even in the beginning, like what's defining her character, the very beginning of this movie is like her relationship with her brother and her dad and looking out for her brother's job at their place of work at the car plant that they work at. And so you can tell how much she loves her family and looks out for them and just cares about people in general. And of course, as she's being hunted, we get how she acts under pressure and getting overloaded with all this information, and comes out the other side in the finale of this movie ready to fight, ready to take this on. And you kind of buy that change. You kind of understand how this person's going to be significant in the future. And then we even get that flash forward. We get that snippet, that scene of her from the future being the leader. And I love that she's not, John Connor was always like, he's going to be this military leader, this great strategist. And her focus is more on her ability to unite people. And I like that approach. She can definitely fight and hold her own, that's shown. But her ability to kind of, the scene that we see, she diffuses the hostile situation and also unites the humans so they can focus on the real enemy, which is the machines. And her ability to do that specifically, I think, is a really cool thing to highlight and differentiates her a bit from John Connor, lets her be her own character. And yeah, all played to perfection by Natalia Reyes. So I think it's an excellent pick for the Mark Strong Award, Andrew. I agree with that strong performance. Personally, I'm going to give the Mark Strong to someone else, but up and down this cast, we have some real heavy hitters. Just about all of them. Wouldn't be shocked if someone was given a Mark Strong Award. But for me, the secret sauce of this movie, what's really elevating it, especially if you want to start comparing it to other Terminator sequels, is Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. First and foremost, I think this is a true legacy sequel. One thing that we haven't mentioned is that this is a direct sequel to T2. It is ignoring all the other Terminator movies. And if those other sequels were never made, we would have a pretty sizable gap between T2 and Dark Fate, which would be known as T3. Because we get all the sequels in between, I can understand someone not qualifying this, quote unquote, as a legacy sequel because it feels like just another entry. But for all intents and purposes, definitely story-wise, what it's doing is the legacy sequel formula. Large gap in your timeline. Bring back legacy characters that sit alongside your new young leads. So that's the role that Linda Hamilton is playing here. And it's awesome. It is, it's the Sarah Connor that we know from T2, but even more battle-hardened and more cold and distant. She lost her son. That has had a huge impact on the character. She's definitely in a very sad place in the beginning here. She says flat out, she drinks until she blacks out, wakes up, and does it again. Hunts down a Terminator. So she's in a very bad place, but she brings so much to this movie. So much... God, there's a specific word that should go here, Andrew. What is Linda Hamilton bringing?
She brings that gravitas.
That's it. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself, Andrew. Gravitas. So much gravitas. Spades and spades of gravitas. Yep. And it makes a huge difference because if you don't have this character, if you just have the new characters, I think you still got a good movie. But it feels like a reboot, It feels a little disconnected, a little cleaner, and she brings like this old world grimy, I think is the word I'm looking for here. This
Grit.
links it to the first two movies in such an obvious way. She's a character from those movies, but really affects the tone of this movie to have someone that knows what's going on to a degree. Because Grace does as well, obviously, but has fought these things and can help them and can teach Danny as the movie is setting up throughout its course. It's great. And her performance here, she gets to do so much, from being vulnerable and grieving still over the loss of her son. The scene where she says she's starting to forget his face is just emotionally devastating. She's also the badass that we love to see, shooting rockets at Terminators, getting impaled and continuing to march forward. And she gets to be a mentor once again and train a young person to be a future soldier. So she gets to play a lot of shades. Does it so well. Looks amazing. The woman is 62, I think, when they make this. And she actually had to dye her hair gray to look believably older, which is awesome. Obviously put in tons of work to get into shape. Was basically retired. Came out of retirement to do this. And knocked it out of the park. And I just think she adds so much to this movie. Like I said, the secret sauce. When you compare this movie to the other sequels they made, I think she is the difference maker. So for that reason, getting my Mark Strong award.
I think this is a fantastic pick. This is obviously one of the ones that's in the running. Yeah, I mean, you talk about a legacy. This movie being a true legacy sequel, like it's the difference between this feeling like a legacy sequel and Genesis not feeling like a legacy sequel. Even though they're these movies both that are trying to play in that sandbox. With Dark Fate, bringing back Linda Hamilton and kind of, dare I say, more effectively using Arnold's presence makes it feel like we're kind of building off of that world that existed before. Whereas Genesis, despite featuring these classic characters and Arnold reprising the role, it doesn't feel like a legacy sequel. And that's partly because the story of that movie overwrites the plot of Terminator 1 and 2 and kind of builds this whole new thing. But it makes it feel like a distinctly different thing. It doesn't feel like it's a sequel to those films. It feels like a separate reboot. Whereas this fits into that space of what a legacy sequel is. And Linda Hamilton, I think, is the linchpin for that. If you kind of just have Arnold here, which is great. I think this is the most effective we've used Arnold possibly since T2. It's going to be good, but Linda Hamilton adds that it factor, that extra layer of making this feel authentic. Feels mean. Like I don't want to say any of the others weren't Terminator movies, but her coming back after having not come back for so long is a big deal. And even me being like just watching from the back, I was like, yeah, her returning is a big deal. And
I think part of it, Andrew, is we talked about this a little bit before we hit record. Like Arnold, like, is he reprising his role every time he comes back? He's literally playing a different character every movie. It's a T-800 that all happen to look like Arnold. So I'm not saying him coming back to these movies isn't special, but it doesn't connect the new movies to the old movies because it's a different character. We know it's a different character versus a human character that is aged coming back in playing the same human character is just a much stronger connection.
Right. I agree. Great point. So in that case, Linda Hamilton is very much the missing piece that adds that connective tissue in a way that, you know, the psychiatrist from Terminator 2 showing up in T3 doesn't quite do on his own. But this is a fantastic performance. Like you said, Linda Hamilton is kind of semi-retired at this point. She occasionally do like guest spots on TV, things like that. She apparently will be joining the last season of Stranger Things. So still out there doing a few things, but had also not shied away from some Terminator stuff in the past. Supposedly, she did lend her voice to Terminator Salvation for new audio recordings.
What do you mean supposedly? We just watched that movie a couple of weeks ago.
She's uncredited,
Don't
man.
believe that's her? Could have been a sound alike. I don't know.
I don't know. No, she did. She clearly did. And did obviously like the Terminator 2 right in the 90s. Has done brief things here and there. And Sarah Connor is just an iconic character. And that's not to say that other people haven't stepped into that role. Obviously, Emilia Clarke did in Terminator Genesis. And I also do want to give a shout out to Lena Headey, who plays the character on Sarah Connor Chronicles. A bit of a underrated thing that I know some Terminator fans really do quite enjoy. And obviously Lena Headey from Game of Thrones, Dredd, all sorts of things. Does a great performance there as well, kind of stepping into that character as well. But Linda Hamilton, this is an iconic character, and it's because of Linda Hamilton. This is still, justly or not, almost everybody's prototypical template for a strong female character is Sarah Connor. And there's a reason for that, and it's Linda Hamilton's performance. So if you're going to bring that character back later, and you're going to go to that route again, you need to have Linda Hamilton. And to the point that apparently Tim Miller has said that like the production had no backup plan if Linda Hamilton said no. They had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
So she took some convincing. I think she said it took about 6 weeks to sign on because they didn't even apparently have a finished script before when they started talking to her. So it took some time, but she came back in, and like I said, I agree with you completely. This is a fantastic performance. This is a great usage of a legacy character. I think the way they go about it it adds ripples to the character, and she ends up propping up and assisting the new characters versus kind of holding them back. So that's what you should be doing.
One of those new characters is Grace Harper, played by Mackenzie Davis. Another very cool character and another excellent performance, in my opinion. This character is interesting because the writers are kind of having their cake and eating it too. We've seen a human come back to protect another human from a Terminator. We've seen a Terminator come back to protect a human from a more advanced Terminator. But now we have a human with the abilities of a Terminator coming back to protect a human from a Terminator. She's an enhanced soldier from the future. So she has these abilities. She has this super strength, and she has like Terminator-like vision that can analyze her surroundings. And she has she's a cyborg, basically. But it's interesting because when I say have their cake and eat it too, because the benefit of her not being a full-on Terminator, a reprogrammed Terminator, is she is a human. She acts like a human, and she has emotions, and she can have these conversations and connect with characters in a way that a Terminator would not be able to. So it really is the best of both worlds from a screenwriting perspective of who you want as your protector in a Terminator movie. And Mackenzie Davis is nailing both of those. She's great as an actor in connecting with the other characters, and she is insanely believable in all of the action that the character has to do. Obviously, another person that went through some boot camp to get ready for this role and just knocks it out of the park in both of those regards. I think Mackenzie's just a very interesting actor. The other main thing that I know her from is the movie Tully, where she plays a significant role there. It's a very strange movie that I enjoyed, but her involvement there was, I don't know. I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but it's very interesting. And I think she's also just very interesting here. Just the perfect pick for this character.
I agree. It's there. It was funny because I was reading in the kind of production notes that this was something that like, I forget who exactly devised this idea of a human enhanced, but apparently they forgot that they did that in Terminator Salvation already.
Yeah.
But obviously we do a different approach here. This is not kind of a Terminator hiding under a human, kind of like it was in Salvation. This is very much a human with augments. And so, but definitely still playing in that same ballpark. And she does do a great job. I think that's a great point. She was believable in all this action. She is basically Danny's protector. the taking on an almost, I mean, I'll say it's obsessive, her desire to protect Danny, to, like I said, the point that she's basically trying to, like, lock her in a box. And I mean, she even says, we'll hide at the bottom of a mine shaft if we have to.
Yeah.
Like Grace's mindset is, I will basically hide Danny from the world as long as I have to make sure that she can do what she needs to. And Danny's not cool with that. But Grace's investment in Danny is made very clear. Basically, it is Danny who saves Grace in the future. And as such, she has a vested interest in Danny making it to that future. But yeah, and it feeds into Danny's arc, and arguably may even be part of why Danny turns into what she is. But her empathy for other humans is the key to Danny's character. And Grace has just seen that firsthand and becomes really, really invested in protecting her, which I think is why she volunteers to be sent back. And Grace does a great job when she's fighting the Rev 9, when she's kind of going through the action and trying to protect her. She's, like you said, she never feels out of place. And she does a great job. I remember from a bunch of different stuff, Tully is a very good cut there if you want to see some more of her work. Minor roles in things like The Martian or Blade Runner 2049, and then even showed up on some episodes of Black Mirror, Love, Death, and Robots, Halt and Catch Fire, the AMC show for anybody that were big fans of that. So a little bit all over the place. But again, with Danny and it'd be interesting to see if Mackenzie had featured into any of the sequels, given that she does exist in the future still. Would have been curious to see that, but obviously this world, unfortunately, is not getting expanded on. And even with Linda and Natalia, like that would have been the dynamic kind of going forward, and it would have been interesting to see how that came to pass. But in this movie, as presented, I love what all these characters are doing, and Mackenzie is a big part of that. She fits in with the group. The chemistry she has with everybody is very, very good, and we're better off for it happening, Chris.
And let's talk about our robots this go around. We have Gabriel Luna playing the Rev 9, which I guess it would be inaccurate maybe to call this thing a Terminator, huh? Well, I guess it's the humans that give the Terminator names, that give the Terminators the name Terminator, so maybe you could still call it a Terminator. I guess Skynet wasn't calling them. Well, what does the T stand for, Andrew? Does it stand for Terminator? T-800? Is that a Terminator 800?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
So obviously this is breaking from the conventional naming of the Terminators from T-800, T-1000, T-X, T-5000. This is a Rev 9 because it's an entirely different AI that has taken over in this future. So I don't know if it's accurate to call it a Terminator or not. Some
they specifically call it a Terminator. Like in this movie, it is called.
Well, of course, Linda Hamilton's going to call it that. Sarah Connor's going to call it that. Does
Grace also calls it a Terminator?
All right. If you say so, Andrew. So it's a Terminator called a Rev 9. Does that mean the T does not stand for Terminator? Why would this one be called?
Maybe it doesn't.
I've got to unpack this. Anyway, I want to get to the performance here of Gabriel Luna, who's doing an excellent job. First of all, the design of this thing is super cool. We're doing another play on the T-1000, and I don't know if they acknowledge it in the movie itself, but like reading about the movie, they refer to that as liquid metal, but it moves and behaves differently than the T-1000 does. It feels a little more like nanobot technology to me. And obviously, it's got that black, inky color. It looks rad, but this go round, it's not just about reforming himself. He has a endoskeleton core that the liquid metal goes around. And the benefit of that is they can separate, and we can have a core acting independently of the reformed liquid metal with no shell. And it's a cool effect. The scene where that effect is revealed, where he gets impaled and the liquid just slides off and the impaled endoskeleton remains in the seat driving, is so rad. I remember that like in the trailer, and I was thinking that's a cool little twist to a Terminator. That endoskeleton's a little bit remixed of what we've seen before. As I said, it's a different AI designing these things, so it looks a little bit different. It's darker, like this dark gray slate metal. It's got like a missing top of its scalp. I don't know why, but it looks cool. It looks different. It looks unique, and that's impressive. 6 movies in, we're still coming up with very interesting killer robots. Gabriel Luna playing the, human form whenever it's trying to hunt down Danny and interact with other humans and speak, is doing an excellent job. And I love it. Like when it breaks out like a Texas accent, depending on who he's talking to. He gets to do some of that dry delivery humor that Arnold has done so many times, like when he crash lands into a backyard and he apologizes, sorry about the shed, as he walks out. It's good. Ultimately, he just has to be like a stone-faced killer, but he has enough opportunities to show a little bit of flair whenever he's interacting with other humans, and I think it's a solid job.
I agree. Gabriel Luna is another guy who looks kind of unique, so him playing the killer robot makes sense here. But yeah, I do like how they choose to play this character. Like you said, there's a little bit of wit, a little bit of more self-awareness of interacting with other people, because you look at Terminator 1, 2, even 3, the Terminators are, especially the Arnold Terminators, are all like very robotic and stoic in their delivery, with the Rev 9 almost from the get-go there's a much more casual interaction with humans. It sounds more natural. It doesn't sound like it's a robot talking to people. The only tell in one of those early conversations is because he calls her Daniela and not Danny. It's not how he's speaking, it's the fact that he says the wrong thing. And that's pretty much the key through everything. Like when he interacts with people, there's this relaxed, casual tone to everything he's saying. He doesn't sound like a robot. He sounds like he's actually having a conversation. And that's, again, we're adding kind of another ripple to it. Definitely building on that idea that, hopefully over time, the machines would have figured out a better way to, the joke being that when the Terminators all look like Arnold and all speak like Arnold, they're not mixing in very well. So now with with Legion and the Rev 9, we've finally gotten one that, by all indications, does do that, does assimilate almost perfectly, and is not identifiable unless you got the tell that tells you so, which is usually based off of the fact that, you know what Danny's nickname is with her friends, and this guy didn't use it. So that's the sort of stuff that I really like adding to this character to kind of show that, yes, we have finally figured out a way to get these things to actually integrate into humanity and not be noticed. And Gabriel Luna is a big part of that. He does a great job portraying the casual side of the character, but then when he needs to be the Terminator, it's never a question. This guy can stand against anybody. Like I said, the Rev 9, the way they choose to portray that is just super cool. And I think the nanobot piece of it is correct. Like, it's not a fluid metal this time. It's like it's reconstructing itself around things. I really like how that all comes together. Having the ability to be in two. And I also like that it's when the nanobot is by itself, it's just in human form, because that's all there is, really. And then the skeleton is the skeleton. It's two separate things that can merge together but can't exist alone. And, creates for some fun action sequences, some fun action set pieces, because you can do two Terminators effectively. And it's all very, very cool. And played to perfection by Gabriel Luna. That's
what they should have called it. The Tuminator.
The Tuminator.
It was right there.
Folks, we've reached the end of the show. There's nothing to do here.
All right. Arnold Schwarzenegger is back as AT-800. This go round, he plays AT-800 that is successful in its mission of killing John Connor. It exists in this interesting space, from what I gather, Andrew. As we know, in T2, they don't just have John Connor survive, but they stop Judgment Day altogether. So in this continuity, what we're saying is that Apocalypse isn't going to happen, so John Connor doesn't need to become a military general, because there's no Judgment Day, there's no uprising of Skynet. so he can just kind of chill and live out his life. But in this world, they have sent back multiple T-800s, and one of them, even though that future is no longer going to exist, it's going to carry out its mission, and it does, and it kills John Connor, and then it literally drops its gun right then and there and walks away. We catch up with it 30 years later, and for one, it has aged, which we explored a bit in Genesis, that these T-800s age because they have living tissue on the outside. But interestingly, what this movie is exploring is, what does a Terminator do when it completes its mission? And the answer is probably the most interesting thing that this movie does. The T-800, as we know, is a learning machine. It's constantly gathering data on humans so it can blend in. And without a mission, without a purpose, it sort of forms a conscience. It starts caring for people. If this T-800 finds a woman and son in need and becomes a surrogate father to the kid and caretaker to the mom, and because of that, feels regret over what he did to John. He understands what he cost Sarah Connor. He understands like how he hurt her, and that's the reason that he's telling her when these other Terminators are coming back. He signs the text messages for John. He's trying to atone for what he did. And it's crazy because like all of this like fits into the lore. It fits into what we know about Terminators from T1 and T2. But it still is like blazing this new path of the mythology. And I think that is just so cool. And it allows Arnold to be the T-800 that we've always known. But because he's lived so long in the human world and around humans, there's just a little bit more humanity than we've seen before. Like whenever I caught, he's like, when he's talking or telling a story, he uses his hands like just a little bit in a way that, you know, the raw T-800 killing machine would not do. He's picked up just these small little human touches. I believe that's the reason why before they go on the final mission, he picks up the sunglasses and doesn't put them on, because he's just a little bit more human, you know, and it's just that little touch. And it's got to be cool for Arnold, after playing this character for so long, so many different movies, to still get these opportunities to play it a little bit differently. And he does a great job. It's Arnold as the T-800. It's always going to be cool, but the new ripples that they add, fantastic stuff.
It's like I said, I'm not joking when I say this is the best use of Arnold in this franchise since T2. Because you think about that, from in T1, it's a human sent back to fight a Terminator. All Arnold has to be is a killing machine, and he has his brief dialogue. Still iconic. I'll be back. All of that, not questioning that whatsoever. But the human is the one sent back to stop him. So you get a human interaction with Sarah. There's human, you know, it's a human perspective. With T2, we flip that formula, and it's the silent killing machine, mostly silent killing machine, sent back to fight, to kill John, but then we send the Terminator back with John. This, again, it adds a new ripple to it, where now we're a Terminator, a fish out of water. He's learning these things. We get a lot of humor over him trying to be human. You know, hasta la vista, baby. It's iconic, but still sounds weird with Arnold saying it, but that's the point, because he's trying to figure out and he's learning these things from John. All of the versions of Arnold in between that, which to be fair is only 3 and 5, are just riffing on that same idea of kind of a fish out of water robot, kind of picking up small things here and there, but by and large being presented the same way. With this, and not to say that there aren't ripples to the characters in those movies and things that they try that are a little bit different. Like in Genesis, we do have the aging, but we don't really get the introspection, if only because in Genesis he's not completed his mission. With this movie, we kind of strip back the whole thing. It's like, okay, like you said, what does a Terminator do when it's finished its mission? Especially when the future he's from doesn't exist. That's kind of the point. The idea here is a slight retcon of T2, with that we've sent back multiple Terminators to kill John, and this one eventually just catches up when they're not expecting it. So he's sent from a future that doesn't exist to kill John Connor in a situation that's never coming to pass. So it, like you said, it then he's done. It's like, cool, there's no other orders coming. And so this is a fantastic use of Arnold. I think Arnold gets the show some really interesting shades here where you can still kind of tell something's weird. Like he's not quite human, but he's acting a lot more human. Like I love when he's like, I'm reliable, I'm a very good listener, and I'm extremely funny. And it's said in like the most deadpan way possible. But it's a fantastic use of Arnold. I think it's probably the best usage of him in this franchise since T2. It's exactly the kind of thing that I would think as an actor you would really want. You're going to come back, but you're not coming back to just do the same thing. You're coming back to do things a little bit differently. And it's just cool. Like you said, we do the aging part, but that whole idea that he like understands what he did. Because if he's built off of Skynet technology and he's got this core, there's no reason to think that he can't eventually figure it out and kind of develop a kind of consciousness. They're kind of clear. They're kind of easy to not say it's like human emotions, but he kind of
the machine equivalent of a
machine equivalent of it. Like he kind of figures it out. He kind of gets the idea. And again, Arnold just getting to show some shades here. Kind of, he's kind of somebody that got painted as like a one-note person for a long time. You're wrong. You've always been wrong if you think that. But here I like him getting to throw some additional shades of this character, and it's fantastic. It's just, like I said, he's the one that I kind of wish they'd preserved from the marketing. The marketing for this movie did reveal that both Linda Hamilton and Arnold were in it. And I really do wish they'd preserved the surprise of at least one of them. But I think Arnold would have been really easy to preserve.
Yeah,
since he doesn't even show up until almost over halfway through the movie.
Yeah, it's about the midpoint. It's over an hour in where he walks out of that cabin. Because you think they're just meeting a guy named Carl. But it's very cool because, had you not known he was in it, you see the de-aged Arnold in the beginning. It's a thing we've seen before.
Sure,
We know it's a reference, whatever. But to know that he actually has a performance in the movie would have been a very cool reveal. But, got to sell some tickets.
Alas.
Yeah.
And then how did that work out?
Even then, it didn't work. So, I don't know. That, it's a pretty lean cast, and I think that covers our main players. We're going to jump into the scenes, but I do want to shout out Edward Furlong, who was initially announced as, hey, he's going to play John Connor again in a small role. And then they kind of had to walk back the way they phrased that, and eventually gets credited simply as John Connor reference. So in the beginning, where we see a young John Connor, it is a digitally recreated face on a different person's body, but the performance is motion captured by Edward Furlong. So he plays, they put this digital face over his movements. So ultimately, that's not too much. However, there was a scene that was actually shot which had dialogue between him and Linda Hamilton, which is a bit more of a performance, and it would be cool to see maybe what that scene was. Maybe it's in the deleted scenes. I haven't checked personally. But the reason it was cut is because they said the CG didn't quite hold up whenever they start speaking, these digital faces. So it was cut, and you have just this shocked expression on John's face as he's getting killed by a Terminator. But it was Edward Furlong providing that shocked expression, and he said he kind of wishes he had more to do and could come back to the franchise in a bigger way. But I still got to think it's got to feel kind of cool to be able to come full circle. We know why he was ultimately not cast in T3. We know about his demons. Seems to be in a better place. So to at least be able to come back and be involved in some way in this movie, I think is pretty cool.
I agree. It was James Cameron actually himself that announced that Furlong would reprise his role, and it was Furlong that kind of had to come out and be like, "Yeah, it's pretty small. Like it's not." And I think even Miller kind of didn't like that Cameron made such a big announcement about it. And then like I said, Furlong had kind of said he wished more. I think he said it was one day of work, and which is interesting that they didn't include a dialogue scene, because I actually think this de-age scene at the beginning is some of the best this stuff has looked. Like I think Linda Hamilton in particular looks really good.
I agree.
Like when I actually, John Connor is kind of where you can tell a little bit, and then Arnold I think a little bit even more so. But when they were showing just Linda Hamilton, like initially I was like, oh, this is just like deleted footage we never used or something, right? Like I genuinely like didn't realize that it was not like us reusing old footage. And I was just super impressed because, it's something that they're using a lot more now. And sometimes it looks good, and sometimes you get Tron Legacy, which is, to be fair to Tron Legacy, it was 14 years ago. We were just kind of figuring that out. And I'm just saying, Disney, if you want to go back and fix something, it's right there. But once again, I'm asking you to fix the CG in Tron Legacy. But yeah, so it's cool to come back. I'm curious, like, what kind of space would he be in now? But ultimately, this story just, the way it's told, the story it's going with, John just doesn't factor in. I just can't see him factoring in a big way that wouldn't kind of ultimately be him either kind of sitting in a very similar role to Sarah Connor, or some kind of idea of T3, kind of the same idea of T3. But it's cool to see him back, even if it is just for a motion capture performance there. But yeah, man, that opening though, when blew me away, that's for sure.
Brutal. Well, Andrew, speaking of the opening, let's just talk about the scenes of this film. But we're going to start with what we consider the high point, the best scene, or at least our personal favorite of the movie. So in your opinion, when is this film firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Terminator Dark Fate?
I am going to go with our Humvee sequence. This is a major action set piece that kind of leads us into the finale of this film, and is basically, we have met up with Carl, which a great scene. We'll talk about that one too. But we've met up with Carl. He's joined up with the cause. He said goodbye to his family and kind of told them they need to go hide. But they've met up with kind of Sarah's military contact to get an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, which I know thanks to all of the films on this that we've covered and Small Soldiers. But they get the EMP, but then they're basically ambushed by the Rev 9. And this leads to an extended sequence where they go to an airfield. They take off into a big C5 that's got a Humvee in the back. And during this whole point, we've got an extended fight with the Rev 9 and the T-800 here. Very, very cool stuff. Just two robots throwing each other around with no regard for anything. Just beating each other up. And just cool stuff. I love watching robots fight. It's not like Mom and Dad. I want the robots to fight. I want to see it, and I want them to do it. And you're seeing how outclassed Arnold is. You're seeing how he's trying to compensate for that, how he's trying to, work with what he's got to take on this much more advanced robot. And during the course of this, the plane is in the air and it gets damaged because of the Rev 9. And Grace, Danny, and Linda kind of have to eject in this Humvee that has parachutes on it. And they're working through all of that while the T-800 and Arnold are fighting. Eventually, we are able to free the Humvee from the plane, very similar to the Living Daylights, I believe it was. Except that was a tank, maybe. I don't remember. But just giving my boy T-Doll a shout out there. But and then we get, the sequence just continues. So at that point, they're parachuting down. Debris of this plane is crashing all around. Arnold and the Rev 9 are still fighting in the body of this plane, like as it's crashing. It's all on fire. It's breaking apart. It just looks cool as hell. It's just awesome. It's the exact kind of stuff that if you're going to use future technology for a big Terminator fight, this is what I want to see. Taking them into a place where not really seen them before too. And then I just always like when we watch stuff on crashing planes for some reason. I just think it's a cool avenue as the thing breaks apart around them. And because of the robots, I don't have to fear that someone's going to get hurt. And so eventually the plane crashes into the water. The Humvee kind of crashes onto the ground. And then Arnold and the Rev 9 have a fight underwater, which is awesome. Yeah. It is just cool. So he ends up in a 2-on-1 because the Rev 9 kind of splits. They like rip off one of his arms. It's just so cool. And it's the kind of stuff that, like I said, you want to use future technology to your advantage. You want to use that to kind of create these scenarios that we've not seen before. And I think this was even one of the sequences that James Cameron apparently gave Tim Miller a list of action sequences that he had been trying to put in movies for years, but had never managed to. And this underwater Humvee, I think, was one of them, because even while they're fighting, you've got you've got Linda, or rather Sarah and Danny, trying to get out of the Humvee. And that's a whole different set of tension and stress for you as a viewer as they work to get out of that. So just a whole lot happening at every single sequence of this, but it's basically this 5-10 minute sequence that just unfolds, and it's awesome. Big Terminator action, Terminator on Terminator fighting. You see all of our other new heroes with Sarah Connor kind of having to think on their feet, be ready for anything, and take some risks. And it's all cool. It kind of shows to this point how everybody is kind of crystallizing into the final forms of themselves as they kind of get ready for the big showdown. Not at a factory this time, but at a dam. It's very different.
Yeah, a little more functional than a generic factory. Setting. But
I love it. This is all great.
I love the idea of James Cameron just having action scenes to go in some movie, just like a notebook full of these ideas. It's a very James Cameron thing, and just the visual of him, like, I don't know, out at lunch with a friend in the middle of conversation. But hold that thought. One second. Pulls out this notebook and jots down Humvee underwater. Okay, sorry. What were you saying? I had to capture this idea that just flashed in my head, and eventually it makes its way into a movie. This scene is incredible, and it's got to be where a huge part of the budget went. And again, I got to shout out Tim Miller. I mean, you can tell a visual effects experienced person is directing this movie, because this action scene, you lay it on paper, it's planes colliding mid-air, a robot transfers from one plane to the other. They have a fight in essentially zero gravity as the plane is going down. You have the Humvee come out, parachute, underwater, action scene continues. There are just so many moving parts that, written on the page, it had to be absolutely bonkers. Linda Hamilton said, like, there was parts of this movie she didn't quite understand because of how complicated the action was. So they had to do like extensive previs so that everyone kind of understood the geography of what was happening here. And it comes together beautifully, seamlessly. It looks awesome. I talking about future technology, I think by and large, I mean, everything is holding up in this movie. I know it's not that old, but I mean, they still make movies with dodgy CG. I just saw The Flash recently. It's insane how uneven movies look these days. You think like all modern movies must look great, but it is all over the place. So this movie, though, I think is holding up, especially in this sequence. So I think this is an absolutely solid pick. I love the robot slugging it out and their different fighting styles, because the T-800 is definitely just brute force. That's all he has. But the Rev 9, whenever like he wraps his liquid metal nanobot around the T-800's arm and just rips all of his flesh off, and then the T-800 just keeps punching just with the robot arm. It's just so
awesome.
Cool. So
just
awesome. And it's always awesome seeing a T-800 get beat up, because more and more the endoskeleton gets exposed. I mean, the visual of Arnold's face where like part of it is like half metal, that's just an iconic look, and we've always got to get there whenever Arnold shows up at the T-800. So Andrew, it's an awesome pick. I agree, just thrilling action, whatever buzzword you want to throw at it, for me applicable.
Yeah.
And definitely underwater when it's Sarah Connor and Danny in the Humvee, and they're like, Sarah's like letting her know the plan with the parachute to tangle them up right before they take their last breath and go underwater. That's always going to ratchet up the tension, because that stuff is truly terrifying. It's great, and I love the finale we jump into with the dam. But before we get there, I want to highlight a different scene as my favorite. And you touched on it a second ago, Andrew, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight it as my personal favorite. It is meeting Carl at his cabin. I mean, I mentioned this kind of twist, the T-800 is my favorite aspect of the movie, or the smartest twist that it does. So I want to highlight the scene where that really comes to light and gets explained. And we have, every character at a crossroads here, and they're all diving into what makes their character great. It's the midpoint of the movie. We've established the conflict. We're going into the finale, and it all crosses here at the cabin. And it's just some excellent dialogue up and down from every character. Obviously, you have Sarah Connor not reacting well to Carl. She has the great line, whatever he says, that he goes by Carl. She says, "I'm never gonna fucking call you Carl." And it's kind of funny, but it's also, she's not saying it to be funny, you know? She's just like, I hate you. And not only because you're a Terminator, but the one that killed my son. I mean, the hate is very real. She unloads her gun on him. Even, she knows it's not going to do anything, but she just has to shoot him. And his reaction, he just looks at the holes in his shirt and he says, "This will be very hard to explain to Alicia." It's great. And yeah, he kind of gives the exposition on how he's developed this, machine version of a consciousness and what happened to him over the years and why he's helping Sarah. And we get these moments of like levity and comedy, but also seriousness, and the gravity of the situation is never undercut. It's just all masterfully done. And other characters share, this is where we get Sarah Connor kind of being vulnerable and talking to Danny and talking about what it was like seeing the T-800 again. And she doesn't have any photographs of John because she didn't want any evidence to exist to make it easier for people to find them. But now it's been so long, she's having trouble remembering his face. And that is just absolutely heartbreaking. And to see this, again, just going back to my Mark Strong Award winner, this badass we've seen kill Terminators now openly crying over the loss of her son. It's just really good stuff. You get Grace being Grace as far as her mission is concerned, because Sarah suggests using Danny as bait, and Grace is vehemently against it. She's saying there's no way, we got to protect her at all costs. So all these characters and all their paths are colliding, and they eventually come to the decision to go with Sarah's plan. They all unite into this, it's one game plan to stop the Rev 9, and it's just so well done. I love this. This might be a stretch, Andrew, but it reminds me a bit of like the farmhouse from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, where we kind of just stop the action. We live with these characters a little bit. We let them develop and bounce ideas off one another. It's a deep breath before we jump back into the action. It's that point of the film, and I just think it's really well done. And speaking of funny lines, I got to talk about Carl shows them his weapon stash, this underground bunker of just walls and walls of guns and ammunition. And they're asking him about it. He's like, well, there's always a possibility that there's going to be a future where I will need these to protect my family. He says, these weapons would be vital in protecting my family. Also, this is Texas. Which, as a native Texan, it's accurate. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I think he says there's a 74% chance that humanity will still fall into some kind of barbarism, I think he calls it. And but it's this whole sequence, I think, is a great choice. It's a great pick. It builds on that idea, and like I said, it adds a ripple to Terminator that I think is genuinely possibly the most interesting thing this movie does. That's not to say that like the plot, I don't like it, but the idea of a future kind of savior, people sent back into the past to protect that person, somebody sent past to kill the person. That's all various shades of things we've done before. It's just executed really well. And in that regard, it works. But with the Terminator, we get a great kind of understanding and idea of what it is. I am curious. He says they sent back multiple Terminators. What about the other guys? That's a question for you.
Are they still out there? Who killed them? Did Carl track them down? Did Sarah eventually kill them? I don't know.
So that's a question I would have had for future sequels. Would that have been a backdoor way to have Arnold still show up as somebody?
Yeah.
Because there's other things, or like you said, did Carl take care of them afterwards? Because it's like, and like after John Connor is killed, do they all now know that John Connor is killed? Or are they all operating independently? Like, how does that work? I don't know. We'll never find out.
Is there a lot of large Austrian men now just living their human lives out there?
Maybe one got really into bodybuilding and then decided to become an actor. But I don't know. But I just think that ripple that it adds of like the mission is done, and the Terminator kind of being like, crap, what do I do now? I'm just like this idea that there's a whole new layer to be unlocked there. I think that was genuinely one of the most interesting things you could have added to this franchise, and I'm glad they did. I think it's a very, very interesting thing to especially potentially revisit down the line whenever we get back around to Terminator again, which we absolutely will at some point, because time is a flat circle. But this sequence, like I said, you get the entire range. You get Sarah kind of being emotional. It's a real kind of thing that when you're on quote unquote a mission, or you're focused on a thing, you kind of hyper focus on that, and the reality of situations can be lost to you, or you could be purposely pushing past them, or even just really not have the time to think about them. So the idea that Sarah has been this focused on killing Terminators and waiting for her next mission, and then now suddenly has to reconcile the reality of her life with everything. It's a great little ripple to add to that character. It's a great scene to do here to kind of slightly interrupt the kind of classic Sarah Connor that we've all come to know. And then you've got this highlighted with these Terminator revelations and Carl's just really unique presentation. This idea that he's like 78% acting like a human, but there's just enough that you can tell it's not quite right.
Yeah. There's this masterful dialogue. This man, it's one of the best things like Arnold has ever said in any of these movies. And Danny asks him about this, family. She sees him say goodbye to them, give him a hug. And he has this great line. He says, "My past has caught up with me and I won't be back," which is, of course, a clever play on his classic line, but also has some emotional weight to it. And Danny asks, she says, "Do you love them?" And he says, "Not like a human can. For many years, I thought it was an advantage. It isn't." That's heartbreaking and haunting.
It is.
And crazy that they've got to this point where they can deliver a line like that from a Terminator. And it's like he longs to be able to feel what a human does so he can connect with this person. Or maybe he just wishes that he could give Alicia something that he knows that he can't, just for her sake. But it's just such a concise line, and it's appropriately said like a robot. I thought this was an advantage. It isn't. Just very mechanical and efficient, but what it's saying is just so emotional. And of course, Arnold's not breaking into tears as he says it, but there's still emotion behind it. It's so well done. That line just, it's one of the best.
It's very good. The whole "I won't be back." They do. They like, I won't say there's not Easter eggs in this movie, but they use them, I think, extremely sparingly.
100%.
They really, like, you get Sarah Connor kind of in her first scene doing the "I'll be back," and then here you kind of get that flip. You kind of get some rejections of the Easter eggs where he says, "I won't be back." He puts the sunglasses back down when he doesn't take them. Like, there's a lot of chances that they could have used them and they don't.
My favorite is Grace showing up to save Danny. And she says real fast, she says, "You come with me or you're dead in the next 30 seconds. The easy thing to do there would be come with me if you want to live. But other than being an Easter egg, that wouldn't make any sense for her to say that same line. This is a different future she comes from. This is not the same timeline. So say the same thing, but in a new way. I think it's just, it's a bigger statement than just having a fun Easter egg.
It's like the same thing, only different.
Right.
And I like that a lot. But this whole sequence, like I said, I think the farmhouse sequence in TMNT is an oddly great metaphor or analog. But I like it a lot. Like I said, I can't speak enough to, like, I know Arnold does not survive the end of this film, but I really do think that like this, if this is his swan song with Terminator, I don't think there's a better way to do it. It is about as it adds new dimensions to the idea of a Terminator. The idea of a Terminator who completed its mission, then realizing that what he did was bad, like that's tremendous. And kind of ultimately the mission that he goes on of trying to give Sarah a mission and trying to make up for what he did, and then ultimately saving Danny and killing the Rev 9. It's just masterful stuff from Arnold. And like I said, if this is the end of him with Terminator, you can't do much better than this, I don't think. This is the kind of legacy send-off. This is the kind of legacy send-off I wish a lot of people got versus, in some cases, what they actually got. It's about as good as it gets.
I agree. It's got the new twist to the T-800, and he's still funny as he's always been. I really love whenever like we cut back to a scene, like we're kind of jumping in mid-story as he's talking to Danny about his job doing interior decorating. And he's talking about a client, and he says he wanted solid colored drapes in a little girl's room. I said, don't do it. Do butterflies or polka dots. Just how serious he's like, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Apparently the reason that Carl does drapes is because Arnold Schwarzenegger himself is into interior design. And James Cameron knew that, and he did that as a nod to him.
That's wonderful.
The man just continues to be interesting.
Chris, I'm not that interesting, and it makes me sad.
It's never too late, Andrew, to get into interior design. I love the glimpses we get of the future because, well, actually, we get a few different ones. We get like a Skynet future early in the beginning where we get the classic endoskeletons marching out of the water, mowing down humans. Always fun to see that. Purple lasers and all. And then we get the future that is of the new timeline, where we have slightly different technology. We have different looking Terminators. We got like the Rev 9-esque Terminators, but instead of, they're not trying to blend in, so they're not making human form. They're using their nanobot technology as like tentacles to whip around, and it is very scary looking. It looks like very terrifying, efficient killer machines. Reminds me a bit of the look from Edge of Tomorrow and the aliens in that movie. But it's cool after, so many movies to see like a new future, a new take on a future. Skynet isn't even a thing anymore. It's Legion now, and we got a totally new look to it. And they did that without rewriting the first two entries. They built on it to still create this new future. So cool stuff and cool look.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked about that finale, Andrew. It takes place at a dam this go around. Pretty cool setting for finale here. And I say that because like there's this big spinning turbine thing that plays a key part. I don't know what that is. I don't know if those are actually in dams. I don't know if a dam was just an excuse to make this big thing, but I also don't care. It's a very cool final action scene. We just had the big airplane crash in Humvee. Now we have a much more grounded fist fight. I love Danny using this chain as her main weapon to slice and dice the Rev 9. I love that when she spins it, the sound effect is like a helicopter rotor because she can spin it so fast with her, enhanced body. It's very cool. We have basically 4-on-1 or 4-on-2 because the Rev 9 splits. And they're eventually able to get the upper hand. And we have our T-800 once again making a big sacrifice. In his final line, he says, "For John." Amazing. And it's almost like this is a different T-800 than the one from T2. Like you'd expect the T2 to make a big sacrifice for John. But now we've got to that same point, and it means something totally different this go round when he says "for John," because again, it's this big atonement journey that he's on. And Sarah Connor's face as she looks down on him, like I wouldn't go as far as say like she forgives him, but she acknowledges the sacrifice, and it closes that chapter in her life. It's great stuff. When you have great action and emotional beats like that, it's so much kudos to the writing for being able to pull that off.
Absolutely. This finale, like I said, it's very cool. We flip the script a little bit and move it from like our standard factory ending into a this kind of dam. It's still a lot of similar DNA here, not gonna lie, but yeah, those are turbines. They're in dams. They're a real thing. I don't think they'd quite be as easily exposed as they are here, but that's just an OSHA violation, and frankly, that's just not safe. But it is a very cool finale. Like I said, I can't speak to just how well Arnold is used here. It is, if it's one thing this movie crushes, besides his actual body, it is their portrayal of Arnold as the Terminator. And it's, like you said, we get a lot of big, cool actions here. Obviously, they blow up this turbine that essentially causes this sort of molten metal to fall into the Rev 9, and that kind of causes the endoskeleton to start crumbling, but it's just enough for them to all get the upper hand against it and use Grace's power source to kind of crush it down, and then Arnold drops him and the Rev 9 into this big hole where they can both kind of die together. And there's, like you said, his last words are for John, right as basically he melts apart. And it is extremely well done, because the idea of a Terminator that knows what it did and knows that it was wrong and willingly leaves his situation where he has a family that cares about him and that he cares about because he knows he has to make up for this and he knows he has to fix this. Just great. Just absolutely wonderful. And this whole sequence, they find, and that's one thing I like about this. Like in T2, Arnold in the T-1000 fight. The T-1000 outmatches him, but they find a lot of clever ways for Arnold in the T-1000 to kind of level the playing field. Here, there's no question that the Rev 9 is more powerful than Arnold. And it really is a group effort pretty much the whole time. Arnold, Carl, as it were, is basically just the last piece to kind of get them over the edge, because they can't handle it on their own. And Arnold basically gives them the key piece to kind of physically oppose it. And the sequences here are all great. Arnold is battered, he's beaten, and he's still going. Like, he's missing an arm, one of his legs is messed up, and he's still going, and he's still not giving up. And it's just really cool. Very cool. Very cool.
Indeed. I love, you talk about it being a group effort. I love when they're like using all their might to force the Rev 9 into that, again, spinning turbine thing. And then Grace, you see like her forearms and her skin starts to split as she's exerting herself so hard. A scene straight out of Ghost in the Shell. Major does that in this iconic scene from there. I gotta imagine there's a conscious homage there, but it's very cool to see that play out. And yeah, just great stuff. I love it. This movie really embraces its R, which we touched on this a bit. The rating of this franchise. The first three are R. Salvation and Genesis are PG-13. This one was back to R. A lot of it for dialogue. They're not afraid of F-bombs, especially Sarah Connor. And I really like, she has this line to the Rev 9 as they're killing it. The Rev 9 is trying to like reason with her. Like, you don't even know Danny, just let her go. Why don't you just let her go? And Sarah says, because we're not machines, you metal motherfucker. And again, dropping a lot of F-bombs. And it's not, action movies always have quips. But in this context, they mean a little bit more, because it's differentiating the humans from the machines. A Terminator wouldn't say something clever right before it blows somebody away, but a human would. So have your human character do that. It's going to help differentiate them. And of course, what she's referring to by saying we're not machines is, I'm saving this person because I'm a human and we care about each other. We have reason beyond just cold hard logic, and it's good. A nice little touch, and that's kind of another throw that praise to kind of the whole Terminator franchise. But I think it's really highlighted well with that line there.
I agree. I think you said it all. Nothing else to add.
I think that's all I got to say about the movie as well. But over in our Discord, we do have a few people that wanted to write in about this movie and Terminator in general. First, we have Ore MW, who says, so I don't know when y'all are going to watch Terminator Dark Fate, but this is what I'll say about it. Well, this week. Yeah, so good timing.
Yeah, very good time.
They say, my favorite thing about Dark Fate is that it is one of the most pro-migration films that I have ever seen. One of the leads is a Latina. The movie is about crossing the border from Mexico to the U.S. The villain takes the form of border control and uses the entire structure of the U.S. border policy in order to enact evil, and our heroes win by fighting back specifically against that system. I think it's phenomenal that the franchise took such bold political stance that would dramatically benefit humanity by implicitly opposing the militarization of borders. I love this take. I love this observation. There's obviously, if you watch the movie, you might pick up on some of that, but I can't say like I zeroed into all this, but hearing it all kind of laid out, I think it's a wonderful take. I did read a few comments from like Cameron and Miller that kind of, they tried to stay very neutral about it. They're like, well, it happens to take place in Mexico. Of course, they have to get to the U.S. Of course, there's going to be border patrol, but we're not trying to make a political statement. It's not my place to say how much of it was intentional, but it's obviously there. I mean, you don't just, happen to have your bad guy be border patrol and your heroes crossing the border without making some kind of statement. And I agree. I think it's timely. I think this movie makes a lot of smart, bold statements, not just about migration, but a more obvious one being that Sarah Connor assumes Danny's purpose is to give birth to a man that's going to save humanity, but it's actually Danny herself that is going to be the savior, because obviously Sarah Connor, her role is to give birth to John Connor, but it's kind of just the natural assumption in these things that it's going to be a man eventually. So it's bucking a lot of trends, upending assumptions and averting expectations, some of which are set by this very franchise. So I think it's doing a lot of smart stuff with the subtext, but I really appreciate Ore MW here shouting out the immigration issues it tackles.
I agree. I think, like you said, this is a pretty tight cast. And we have, like, even the Terminator is played by a Latino actor, and that is very, very cool. Like you said, they can play coy, and maybe we're giving them more credit than they deserve. I don't know, but the result is there, and I think that is very cool.
Now that we're here at the end of Terminator month, we also have this comment left by that guy in Doom, who says, I'm just going to throw this out there about the entire Terminator franchise as a whole. I love how each one does something different and pushes different boundaries. Rise of the Machines introduced the idea that Judgment Day is inevitable and nothing can be done to stop it. Salvation brings up the idea of Skynet subtly taking over the human race without them even knowing it. Then Genesis flips the script by, instead of Skynet going back to kill John Connor, they go back to ensure that Skynet is created in the first place. And finally, Dark Fate brings up the concept that Skynet, quote unquote, or its variations, will always have a John Connor type fighting against it. Now, there are plenty of subtle ideas that ultimately got abandoned, like Arnold being upgraded to a T-1000, or literally any of the subplots of Genesis. I do feel there is always room for weird time travel hijinks with Terminator, so anything can happen. And I heard recently that Cameron is working on a script for a new Terminator. The franchise will continue because all franchises do, but I think overall this is just an excellent point that, as we learned over the course of this month, it's a roller coaster of sequels. It's up and down, good and bad, all over the place. But it's all different. It's all trying different things, and I think always applaud that. I'll always applaud the ambition.
Yeah, I agree. there's it's easy to play it safe. When you take some risks, maybe they don't pay off, but I'll at least appreciate that you tried something versus just kind of doing the same thing again. And yeah, and I'll say this: James Cameron's working on lots of things.
He's working on lots of things, but in a much more real way. He's working on one thing.
Yeah, he's working on Avatar.
I expect actually happen on the Avatar sequels.
Well, and to be fair, like I didn't realize his involvement here was quite as heavy as it ended up being. It kind of, I say this as nicely as possible. I'm kind of shocked Tim Miller made it to the end. It kind of sounded like Cameron was, it's ironic that Cameron was like, I don't want to be on set because I don't want to get in Tim's way. But it certainly sounds like Cameron had a lot of input, a lot of disagreements, and a lot of ways that he wanted to do things. Then I don't know that those are all the result. I just don't know what his ultimate goal was, but it sounds like he was very heavily involved at several parts of this film, at least from kind of remotely or however you want to call it. But I'd be curious what angle they would try next. I'm sure there's an angle to be found. But like I said, they'll come back around to this eventually just because they always do.
All right, Andrew, another month down, another category, another theme for our podcast, terminated. It's over. No more Terminator sequels. Hey, if they make another one, maybe we will resurrect this theme and bring it back and cover that. But for now, it's time to move into the month of July, which means a whole new theme for our episodes. In the month of July, every episode is going to be based on a poorly received film that was itself based on a book. Lots of movies were first a book. Sometimes they turn out really well and they're very popular. Sometimes, well, not so much. We'll be digging into that second category to find all the positives and all the things that worked in those poorly received movies based on a book. Andrew, you excited for that one?
I am. As you know, I have a great many books behind me as we record. The fans cannot see those, but I love reading. I love books. I'm excited to talk about some of these books that we've got lined up. Some of them are my favorites, and some of these movies I think are a little overlooked. So I'm excited to go back and talk about them.
Yeah. No, obviously we have a lot of experience, with movies based on comic books, but it's a little bit different adapting a novel versus adapting a comic, which already has some visuals. Books, I mean, a big problem is the books tend to be longer story-wise than the movie ends up being. So, like, what do you cut out? What's important? Of course, giving definitive visuals to things that only existed in someone's imagination as they read the book. I mean, it's quite a different medium. It's a huge challenge, and it does work sometimes. But I think there's a lot of movies we have to kind of choose from as far as deciding which ones we're going to cover. If you want to take a look at what movies we decided on, which ones we're covering in July, then I suggest you hop into our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. You can give us your thoughts on those movies, and whenever we record that episode, we'll be sure to read your thoughts on the episode. I always want to say on air, but that's not really accurate. We're not on air. We're on digital airwaves.
Welcome to talk radio, folks.
Well, look, I'm excited to dive into it. And until next month, until our month of movies based on a book, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
I am giving the Mark Strong to one of our new characters. I am giving it to Natalia Reyes, who plays our new heroine, or our new hero, excuse me, who plays our new hero, Danny Ramos. God damn it. Son of a bitch. Stop reading things phonetically, Andrew. So I'm going with one of our new characters. I'm going with Natalia Reyes, who plays our new hero, or kind of hero of the future, Danny Jesus, Chris, what is wrong with me today? I can't even talk.
Ramos.
Who plays our new hero, Danny Ramos.
Ramos.
Shit. Who plays our new hero, Danny Ramos.